And we're live. Hey everyone, it's GQ here from LTV Plus, and thank you so much for joining us for today's roundtable on the topic of humanizing customer support in the digital transformation era. Now, before we begin, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping and just share kind of like what the agenda is looking like for today, and so you know what to expect and how you can plan your time through this roundtable, taking notes and asking questions. So the first part of it, we'll do a quick introduction of all the speakers that we have today, and we have a great lineup from Gorgeous and Textline. The second part of that is that before we dive into the humanization or humanizing aspect of customer service or customer support, we'll first talk about the benefits of automating customer support. Because as your business or your brand is scaling, how do you do that without always just constantly adding people? How can you work with the technology today, which is super advanced and able to help you scale your customer experience at scale, right? And then the third part of that is the tools for customer support. So we'll talk about what tools do you have readily available that you could use, how you can better tap on those tools to obviously provide better automation, and also equipping your agents to better respond to your customers. And that's also a component of the humanization aspect. And then finally, number four, we're going to be talking about how you can humanize customer support, right? So we've set up, all the different technologies, different automations. What else can we do? And of course, we have experts from Gorgeous and Textline to share that with you as well. And I think that will be obviously super interesting. And of course, throughout the entire roundtable, you are more than welcome to leave your questions. Send your questions in, and we will address them at the Q&A section before we round off the roundtable. And then finally, stay till the end, and we do have offers for each brand. And so, if you're looking to get a new help desk or a new text messaging service, text messaging software, stick around and see what offers we have available from Gorgeous and Textline. So, without further ado, let's do the speaker introductions real quick. And so, first up, we have Neil from Gorgeous. Hey,
Hello. Thank you, GQ. Oh, look, there I am, up on screen.
Feel
That's
free to.
on you go.
I don't want to interrupt your introductions because you definitely do it better than I can.
All right, yeah, nice one. Well, thank you very much. Very happy to be here. In terms of sort of me and Gorgeous, I'll introduce both of them. So, a quick bit of my background. I've worked in digital and e-com for about 8.5 years, across a variety of different roles, mostly sort of sales and strategy based. And that was agency side. So I've worked with Gorgeous from an agency point of view. So I've seen a lot of challenges of brands solved through our technology and a whole suite of e-commerce technologies. And then the second kind of part to what I do is I also run my own brand. So I'm kind of here with a slightly unique perspective in that I worked agency side for a long time. I started my own brand on Shopify, and I obviously have Gorgeous on my store. And now I'm actually working at Gorgeous, which is a company that I've always said I would love to work at. And for those who don't know actually what we do at Gorgeous, we are the number one help desk for brands for e-commerce brands on Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento. And what we do is pull together all the customer service channels that a brand has with their customers into one place. So email, live chat, Facebook, Instagram, and that's the comments and direct messages side of it. Obviously SMS, phone as well. And we've got a very exciting WhatsApp integration launching this quarter. And as you can imagine, by pulling everything together into one place, what we do is create a much more efficient way of brands communicating with their customers. We're growing fast. We've got about 9,000 D2C brands across all different verticals. And we'll get onto this in a bit, but really what we try and do is automate the responses. So I've just had a question there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, definitely. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting.
You
I
hear
can
okay?
definitely hear you. But yeah, that's
Cool, got it. We'll continue. And we'll get onto this in a bit, but we automate as much as possible while still retaining that human element. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And yeah, I love to pick your brains on the humanizing aspect, right? Because, when people think about digital transformation, they're thinking, okay, do we lose the human touch? But we'll get right to that in the roundtable. And next up, we have our next speaker that's joining us for today's roundtable as well. And we have AJ from TextLine. AJ, welcome to the roundtable.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this next hour. So, just a little bit about myself. I'm the COO of TextLine. We are a business text messaging platform that allows brands and companies to communicate with their customers like they are old friends. And we kind of cover a few different verticals and industries that touch the direct to consumer space. So everything from traditional customer support to sales and marketing, and then the logistics and operation, or that last mile. And I think what we really strive to do is to really bring personalization at scale. A lot of what we talk about is thinking about how do you bring that kind of Main Street USA, that small shop feel, to every brand and scaled across every customer. And so, I think we're able to do that across a variety of different brands and different industries and verticals. And really excited to be here with Gorgeous as they're an integration partner of us, and we work with a lot of shared customers. And I think we complement what Gorgeous does in a lot of other contact centers and help centers pretty well, because texting is its own, right? It's really a way to be able to handle multiple conversations, but it's not quite chat and it's not quite phone. It's kind of its own unique niche, and I think a lot of companies offer very introductory forms of texting, and we kind of take it kind of all the way, so you can get the business benefits of it, but also keep that personalization.
Very cool. Thank you so much for the intro, AJ. And yeah, I think the key thing actually, you just like not hit it on the nail. Personalization at scale. That's like the hot topic, and it's been going through the entire year. We were talking about this, and we were, many, I mean, a lot of people exploring this topic over the past year until till this year as well. So that's amazing. Well, we'll definitely dive into that. So thanks for joining us today, AJ and Neil. And just to quickly round this off, I'll introduce myself. So I mentioned that my name is GQ and I'm from LTV Plus. And what's really interesting is that we're partners with Gorgeous and Textline, and we're a contact center ourselves, and we provide omni-channel customer service and fill payment recovery, because our goal is to increase the lifetime value for e-commerce brands. And of course, that's why the name LTV Plus, to keep it as simple as possible. Now, of course, outside of e-commerce, we do SaaS, educational businesses, gaming companies, and a lot more. The core of it, and we believe in this as the humanization aspect, right, is that we build, train, and manage dedicated teams. And our belief is that with such great technologies like Gorgeous and Textline out there right now, how does the human factor come in, and how does it all blend well together? So without further ado, let's start on the first topic: benefits of customer support automation. And I think this is where we can, as we say, talk about personalization at scale. So why should brands, I guess the first question here is, why should brands consider automating their customer support? And I will start with Gorgeous. I'll start with Neil first. I think that was one of the key points that you had brought up from under Gorgeous.
Yeah. So I guess the question was like, why should they do it? And I think this kind of hits home for me, because I'm actually running a workshop tomorrow at IRX. So if anyone watching this is going to IRX tomorrow, feel free to come and see my workshop. A bit of a plug there. But the reason it hits home is that my like number one tip for brands who want to improve their customer experience, regardless of tech, is simply to be fast. And one of the best ways of being fast is to automate the things that we can automate. So things like, where is my order? Asking like a lot of post sales questions can be automated without really needing that human touch. And it was actually one of my colleagues said something really interesting. It was like, the best customer support is no customer support. And in other words, if we can enable that customer to self-serve and get that information without them waiting to speak to a human, then everyone has a better customer experience. So rule number one for me would be like, be fast. And one of the best ways to do that is to automate it. So that's why I guess we should automate at least the very easy questions.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting that you brought that up, like the self-serve piece, right? I like that saying where it says like the best type of customer service is like best type of customer support is like no customer support at all.
Yeah,
But where do you think that kind of I guess where does that line break, right? Because like obviously there will come a point where there are some complexities that we cannot complexities in an inquiry that we couldn't really address with automation, right? Like where does that usually taper off based on what you've seen at Gorgeous?
yeah. So I think like it's really important that number one, we meet the customer on the channel that they're comfortable with, and also give them the ability to at any point during that conversation or that interaction choose whether or not to go with something like an automated process, or if they're feel like they're not getting anywhere with that, move and instantly speak to a human, or move to a channel where they know that they're going to get that human interaction. So I think it depends on the individual, it depends on the industry, it depends on the brand. For example, luxury brands, they try and provide a more personalized luxury experience through the human touch much earlier on in a sales process if it's a much higher if it's a higher ticket item, but also in that post sales process as well. So I do see certain brands being more reticent to engage with the automation side of things, usually if they're luxury brands.
With luxury brands, yeah, because you have more of that personal touch, like you mentioned, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to quickly defer to AJ here. So we talked about personalization at scale. With what Neil has shared, what do you think about that?
No, I think there's a lot of merit to what he shared, and I think ultimately the reason why you want automation, right? I think there's twofold, right? One, internally as a business, it helps your business be more effective and efficient and reduce costs and allow you to deal with customers faster. And then on the other side, from a customer perspective, I think just to touch on what Neil said, meeting customers where they are is really important. Some customers don't want to communicate with anybody. Others want to only communicate with people. And I
Hmm.
think that, kind of what we found is that brands that, can kind of still have kind of those efficiencies in place, but still has kind of an arm's length to the customer, is the one that really can achieve both. But I think ultimately, kind of when you think about automation, I think you really have to start with what the goal is of automation. Because I think there are some companies that we see that want to automate everything just because they need to save costs, and other
Hmm.
brands want to automate everything just because they think that their customer will be able to self-serve a bit more or whatnot, and they may be losing out on some of that longer tail kind of relationship building. And so I think it really just depends on what your goals are and kind of your business. I think there is value in luxury brands wanting to stay much closer to the customer or higher ticket items, or even businesses that have higher repeat purchases. But we talk about internally when we onboard customers, if you're selling pencils, right, you don't need a white glove experience, right? It's just
Hmm.
such a
Hmm.
simple, easy thing. And it's a one-time purchase. But most things are trust driven and brand driven, especially with the customer in the driver's seat these days. I think most people are looking at, I forget the statistic, 7 or 8 different resources before making a buying decision. And I think because of that, the role of direct to consumer brands is now being an additional consultant and additional person to kind of validate where you're going. And so, I think that's why we're very bullish on texting in general, just because I think, it allows you to kind of be automated as well as kind of still allow that personalization and be kind of that jumping off point to transition to a call or video if need be, or transition to, email follow up. So I think, I cringe a little with when we talk about automation, because I'm, we built Textline as a two-way communication to build relationships, and we think that automation enables and kind of scales that personalization that we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's interesting because if I understood this at least at a high level, that with the automation aspects that TextLine provides, for example, it helps to jumpstart those conversations, right? And so you
Yeah.
have that, what do you call it? You have that conversation started, and I think that is also similar, I guess, at some level to what, uh, well, maybe Neil, you can share some light, shed some light here as well. Like like I know an aspect of automation is to manage with, for example, inquiries. Like you mentioned, like if you sell pencils and stuff, certain aspects of that you can automate, right? Like, and you said what are the goals, and we'll touch on that later on. But do like would you say that with the automation piece as well, that Gorgeous is also in an aspect also helping to start those conversations as well? Like because like with our experiences working with Gorgeous and Techline, like we use that, as you said, to start those conversations. Like, yeah, we give things like or like what do you call it, what status of your orders and stuff like that, but we also look at it as how can we automate so that we can start a conversation. And I bring one to mind real quickly right now, where we talk about say subscription recovery, right? Let's say a customer has a failed payment and you send a text message, that goes through, and then we start that conversation two ways, right? Or be in an email, etc., and then we have the conversation because they realize, hey, it came from a human agent versus, like, I don't know, support at something, right? And you have that conversation going, and now that opportunity created allows the agent to either, like, provide support, maybe tweak
Yeah,
the subscription, maybe offer an
yeah,
upsell. And so in that sense, it creates this new touch point through automation, and you're
yeah.
doing that at scale. So yeah, I know that was a little bit long, like diving into that, but like, Neil, like with Gorgeous, for example, do you see that happening with Gorgeous? Do you see that happening with brands to kickstart, like, does automation help kickstart these conversations?
Like 100%. So one of my favorite parts, and again, this is going to be my workshop tomorrow. But one of my favorite parts of Gorgeous is that we can automate um, proactive campaigns. So when someone has maybe landed on a particular product or a particular collection, or if they've been on a page for a certain amount of time, then we can proactively reach out to them via like the little chat, live chat widget, and say, do you need help? And one of my favorite examples is a beauty brand, and they noticed that they were getting loads of questions about what shades of lipstick should I choose. So they set up one of these proactive automated chat campaigns, and essentially what they said was, would you like a hand choosing your shade? And that part of it was automated, but it looked as if it was coming from a real person. So this is actually a really nice example of how to balance the automation with the human touch, because people would then respond to those messages if they needed help, and a real human would then be able to offer a recommendation on the shade. And they were seeing crazy conversion rate through just that one little campaign of like over 20%. Um, so yeah, that's probably one of my favorite examples of how we can automate to uncover the opportunity, and then once you have that opportunity, use the human touch to maximize the conversion.
And do
Can
we
I?
and so this is because, like, we're talking about, and we'll talk about this later on as well, but like the omni-channel approach, right? And I think that's a really cool example. And I'll go back to AJ right there. So, when it comes to text messaging, because this is a very popular channel. I think it's been growing, and I'm pretty sure Neil, AJ, both of you have seen this across last year till this year now. Do you see that? Maybe let's talk about the automating that conversation to kickstart a conversation. But do you see that SMS itself as a very popular channel for communication right now? Because, like, in my impression is, like, emails saturated for the most part, right? People get a lot of emails. They kind of tune out, or for marketing emails and stuff. You have phone calls, but phone calls, you can only scale that much, and people generally don't really want to use a phone that much unless they really have to. And so then you have live chat as well, but that's another thing altogether. But with SMS, do you see this as a growing channel that people are, that if brands are not using this now, that they should consider that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is yes. There's, more and more companies and brands that you see that offer texting nowadays than even when we started 4 years ago. And as far as kind of looking at kind of the automation aspect of it, I think from a proactive perspective, some that we love and that we see really come from different stages in the buyer journey. Right. I think the first one is post purchase, which is probably the most common. So whether it's a subscription service or it's your first time purchase of, a mattress or a beauty product, anything that has some level of repeatability or potential upsell, brands just proactively checking in and saying, hey there, this is AJ at XYZ company. I saw this is your first purchase. Just wanted to see how things have gone, right? Because if someone doesn't actually
Mhm.
use the product or has a good experience, there's a few things that could happen. One, they may never actually experience the brand and then move forward with actually knowing how awesome your product or service is. The second piece is, I think being able to get ahead of any potential issues with the customer that may lead to churn. And then lastly, I think we all understand how important kind of social reviews, and I was kind of talking about that, and it's really giving people a space to vent if there is an issue, so they're not publicly venting, and on public forums that really impact your brand. So that's kind of one of the more common proactive check-ins that we see, and we see this also at a 6 month mark, at a 12-month mark, or whatever it may be, whether there's a renewal cycle or just kind of a natural point where someone will buy again. We see that. And then the other place that we see this, that I think is actually really really smart, is when somebody expresses interest and reaches out to a brand first, via text, and being able to just ask a question, and if there's no action taken, being able to follow up with text. Hey, I saw that you were interested. Are you still interested in XYZ? And with this, I think I've touched on this, and you touched on this, is that when you're looking to communicate, right, we don't believe that texting is the end all be all, right? There's a
Mhm.
time and a place for every channel. And sometimes you do need to transition to phone or video or, email. And so texting a lot of times can be the jumping off point for that if you are able to get in touch with someone.
All right. And so, on the topic of, we talked about different channels and we talked about, well, I think the topic of automation can probably go on for a few more hours, if we want to figure out how this could work. But I like to dive into the nitty gritty, if you will, like, into how, how different tools, especially like obviously with Textland and Gorgeous, how brands can leverage your tools to automating certain aspects of that, but also delivering and I will just keep using this phrase now, personalization at scale, right? So, on that note, let's talk a little bit about the tools for customer support, and we'll continue with AJ first, just to kind of dive into that. So, we talked about taking that across to other channels and stuff, but let's focus on text line for now, right? Like, how one thing that I really love about your product as well, as you said, is that you advocate two-way conversations, right? Because you want to hear, brands want to hear from their customers. So if you could walk us through, like, how does text line work for customer support? How does SMS as a tool work? I mean, you've given us great examples in some levels of automation, but if you'd like to add on to that.
Yeah, I mean, from a product perspective, and a tech stack perspective, there's kind of a lot of different ways that we see companies work, right? I think it depends on how your team is first set up. If you have dedicated teams to different channels, we generally see teams working out of the text line product if they're text only. If they're working across multi channels and are integrated with a tool like Gorgeous, a lot of times they'll be working out of Gorgeous and using our tools for texting. So there's a lot of the standard, shortcuts, claiming, resolving, transferring, things that happen. But I think what makes TextLine, really, really special is kind of a lot of the solutions that we provide to, I think touching on some of that automation at scale, whether it's leveraging ways to send a message to a large group of people. So one message that's personalized to, let's say, 100 folks around, their order update, or leveraging our APIs and triggers to be able to send messages. You can do that, and then we also offer a lot of ways to keep the conversation moving and going throughout the customer journey. So things like customer surveys, CSAT, NPS, or kind of whatever you choose. And so, I think all of this is kind of part of the solution. But I think really the key value of Textline is our people, right, and our own personalization, because every company has their own unique goals and how they set up their tech stack and their workflow. And really, what I think why we've been successful so far is that our team is really much, kind of workflow consultants, and really trying to kind of make texting fit within your existing work stack or workflow and tech stack, because we're aware that a lot of times you already have all of these other channels, and texting needs to be a seamless part of that. And so we want to be able to kind of fit with what you're doing, and then like you're saying, GQ, it just kind of continuing to morph and grow into more usage.
And one thing that caught, one of the things that you brought up that TextLine does, and that is obviously really interesting as well, is the survey piece, right? Because one of the things that at LT Plus we like to do is to find out more from customers. So while we do that over real interactions, live interactions, we'd also want to kind of get a pulse on how customers, view
Mhm.
products, view our service. So I'm curious, like, what's the maybe open rate's the wrong word, but how well do people interact with surveys through texting? Because I know, like, with emails, it's a certain percentage and stuff, maybe not always the best, but yeah, I'm curious to hear how that works.
I guess I should have had this prepared, before this, but I know it is significantly higher than email and even phone surveys. And I think a big reason for that is when you think about the customer journey, it's not fragmented. Let's say I'm
Hmm.
texting with a customer, and I end that or resolve that conversation. Immediately, a survey will go out in the channel that you've already been communicating in a relevant manner, where it's just right there, and it's simply 1 to 5, or whatever score system you're using,
Yep.
to respond. And I think the response rates translate there. I think a lot of brands struggle when you transition from a voice call to then an email that gets sent to you, or a voice call to it being in your app, right? If you have an app environment where it shows up. So I think with texting, I think the relevancy becomes really important in the expectation setting.
Okay, that's yeah. Because this was, I was just really curious about that, and like, I mean, I think it's a statistic that you probably have that somewhere on TextLine as well. I was really curious about how those surveys will work out. And one thing that was really interesting as well, it's like, finding out the metrics. If I understand here, and because LT Plus, one of the big things that we do is the training piece, and we want to understand how agents are doing. And I think brands are very interested in how their team is performing. And obviously, I think TextLine has its own pretty robust system, right? So, we talked about CSATs, for example, but what other aspects of an agent's performance can we find from TextLine, for example, so that people understand whether their agents are doing well?
Yeah, I think you have a lot of classic customer support contact center statistics, like average time to first response. I think another one that's pretty interesting is looking at the number of conversations someone is able to handle. So as you're planning for your support team, you can say, hey, within a given hour, an agent can handle 30, 40, 50 text conversations. Some are getting resolved, some are new, and they're happening pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And so I think that becomes a really interesting place to just look at, both from an individual agent performance perspective, but then also kind of as a larger organization. So of course there's response rates and things like that, and I think from surveys we offer the response rates there as well. I think one other stat that I find really interesting is also just looking at, when you look at dispositions. We offer our own dispositions. I know Gorgeous does as well, and others, but specifically around when you use automations. So one common example that comes to mind is when someone texts in, if there's a 2, 3, 4 minute delay, a lot of companies will send an automated text that says something like, Thanks for contacting XYZ company. All of our agents are busy right now. We'll get back to you, at our earliest convenience. And being able to really see that even if a customer has to wait because, all your agents are busy or whatnot, that you're still able to get to resolution and you're still able to get those higher satisfaction scores. And I think a big function of that is just inherently the nature of text, right? Where if, a support rep is busy, you may be able to go to the bathroom, go to the coffee shop, take care of an errand at home or whatever, and not have to feel like you're on the phone waiting or on live chat waiting or whatever it may be. But it's all in your phone, and that you have that kind of concierge like experience. And so you can kind of track, being able to test a lot of these different kind of workflows.
And that goes back to the benefits of automation, right? At some level, I really like that. Yeah, because if you think about that actively, yeah, if someone's waiting over text messages, it's like, yeah, if I send something and I don't see anything in the next few minutes, like sending that reminder or that status update, it helps me understand. Okay, cool. You guys are looking at it, and the brand will get back to me at a later time. But now we talked about the text piece, so let's look at it from the omni-channel piece, right? So we go, Neil, let's talk a little bit briefly about Gorgeous, right? So we can start with the metrics first, right? Like, what does Gorgeous typically measure for customer support? Because like with AJ, we talked about SMS, and we talked about texting, and that's a
Yep.
very strong primary focus. At Gorgeous, how do you bring it all together with text line?
Yeah, so interesting hearing more about how AJ approaches that. But what I've realised is that we're very aligned in some ways, or in a lot of ways. So in terms of the things that we measure, we can actually measure the revenue that's being generated by by your customer support team, down to sort of agent level, and then the other things that we measure, like the key metrics, would be first response time, resolution time, and really that's the key things that determine whether or not a customer has had a good or a bad experience. Because if you imagine, like, say what you want about Amazon as a company, if there's one thing they do really, really well, it is provide an excellent customer experience. So you rarely actually speak to a human at Amazon, but you'll still get like a really good customer service. Um, but I mean, coming back to sort of Gorgeous and what we do, to I think there's one key part that I want to highlight really, which is the integrations with third parties and how we can use that to help. So basically, if you imagine that we're talking about personalization at scale, right? So we're like you as a brand, you're integrated with the likes of Textline, with Yotpo, with Klaviyo, with whoever it might be. Um, we can provide what would almost seem like a human experience because of these deep integrations. So even if something is an automated response, we can still pull in so much data from the whole e-commerce ecosystem because it's all in one place that almost provides that human experience, but at a much faster rate. And I guess like an example of that would be in my own brand. So like lots of brands, we're going to be measuring, we're going to be running social ads. One of the ways that I use Gorgeous to really help is through like the sentiment detection, because people are always going to be commenting on ads, whether or not it's positive or negative. So what Gorge can do is identify the sentiment of those comments or messages, and then segment them out. So if there's a positive comment, then I can choose to either automate a response or an action. So, for example, if I'm running ads and someone positively comments about the brand, then I can use Gorgeous to like that comment and then set that aside so that when me or one of the team have time to respond to that, we can respond with a human touch. Similarly, if someone comments something negative, which does happen because we all get trolls on our ads, we can flag that and decide whether or not we want to, maybe temporarily hide the comment or just leave it out there and respond to it with a human touch later on. So I guess like that's like one of the biggest things that are my favorite features is the sentiment detection and being able to segment out not just like positive and negative, but also things like questions and the message intent.
And I
I
think
mean, there's
that's
a few other examples I was going to go on to, but I'll pause for breath there.
No worries. Yeah, because the one thing that I really like, like why we really love working together with Gorgeous and Textline is that we can get the full picture, right? Like one of the big things that we advocate with brands is that if you don't have your help desk or a help desk that integrates with different communication platforms, or having one where you can centralize your communication, you're missing out on a lot. Because like you said, you have the full customer profile in front of you. And I like to always share this example where if I were to make a phone call today, for example, and drop you a text on Facebook and maybe drop you a chat, for example, I'd ideally not like to get hit up by three different agents with the same questions over and over again, like, hey, why are you so hey, why are you contacting us today, et cetera, et cetera. It'll be really nice, for example, like when you have this conversation over Facebook and then you go to chat and it's like, hey, GQ, I saw that you contacted us on Facebook before. Don't worry, what we're already addressing inquiry, blah blah blah. Just like creating that example as we go, right, and having that omni-channel experience or that centralized help desk really makes a huge difference.
For
But
sure.
and I think that one thing that also the other thing that some brands can really consider is how much revenue can customer service generate, and not many brands necessarily what do you call it, measure that metric, right? They're like, okay, yeah,
No.
customer service is a cost center. We just have to spend money to put someone there or put technology there just to make people happy, and then we kind of see that overall growth. I'm not saying that people don't pay attention to that, but they don't actively view it as um, I wouldn't say transactional, but like what's the ROI out of customer
Yeah.
service, right?
Yeah, 100%. I'm always super surprised if I'm, speaking. I quite often ask people, because I'm genuinely curious as to who in the audience might be prioritizing customer service in their
Yep.
business at the moment. And inevitably, people raise their hands, maybe like a 50-50 split. And then you go on to ask, okay, for those of you who are prioritizing it or not, who's measuring how much revenue that your support team is generating? And genuinely, there's just a handful of hands that go up. So it's not something that is commonly measured, and a lot of that comes down to tooling and people not really being aware of the tools available to them that would allow them to do that. But once they're turned on to that, it's very easy for brands to see the value there.
Yeah, I mean, really quickly, I think that the data becomes really important because we live in a world where, in a way, we can't make decisions without data, right? Nowadays. But just from a common sense perspective, right? Your customer support team is no different than if you're in a physical retail store and that retail associate is the sales rep, the support rep, the operations, the return specialist, everything in one. And I think that, especially as we've moved more and more online, customer support is really a revenue center for you and not just a cost center, because you're either helping make that first purchase as a salesperson, or you're helping support and retain that customer long term. I think anytime someone has a question on a product, that is not a support thing. That's a sales opportunity for your team. And I think when we see more customer or more brands think of it as that, I think you see the ROI for those brands grow quite a bit more.
No, and you're absolutely right. Like when you have these inquiries, that's the opportunity, right? Like we talked about this, be it over text, be it over chat or email. That's your opportunity to provide the support, or not support, but like the information that people need, and suggest also like the appropriate products. So like what kind of, like, depending on like what the brand is selling or offering, like to offer the right package or the right product, and that way you end up with a customer that's actually happy for the long term, right? Because sometimes people think like, hey, like let's talk about rapid fire sales. Of course, depending on the product, that might make sense, but you always want to offer the right fit as much as possible, because then people talk about your brand, they talk about your products, and like, hey, I was actually going to go for A, but then I was actually offered B, which actually was what I was really looking for, because they didn't really know about it. And as a brand, we're the experts, right? And so we should be able to kind of suggest that.
I'm sure you two have seen this as well, but you see or we've seen the transition of a lot of brands providing consultants, right? Either a fit a fit consultant, a sleep consultant, a this, that, or the other. And those are essentially, experts, product experts, sales folks trying to, give you the information that you need. These folks are also handling some returns and, whatever it may be. But I think, that's kind of where, with the customer in the driver's seat, it's no longer a transactional experience with the brand. The customer's looking for that co-pilot to help them make those buying decisions.
Yeah. I was just going to kind of expand on that. Is part of or one of the main challenges that I see when I speak to brands is that they say like they don't have the resource in house to really dedicate to customer service a lot of the time, or maybe their customer service agents aren't sales focused, and then that is, I guess, why we work with people like LTV Plus who can provide that service, and why I'm often an advocate of outsourcing customer service where possible, because you do end up with people, customer service agents, who can become those product experts, who are well versed in the sort of the conversational commerce way of selling, and providing support. So yeah, I mean that's I guess a plug for LTV Plus there unintentionally, but I think like what the way that you guys are working providing customer service is the way that a lot of brands should be aspiring to do it.
And that said, that we just got this interesting question that came through here, and I think it's appropriate with what we're talking about, right? So like we had the
Mhm.
question said, a question is, can you explain where Gorgeous starts and stops, where LTV starts and stops, and if text line is only tech support? So maybe Neil, let's start with you first, because where does Gorgeous in the so like, let's look at customer support as an entire process till like, because I think this process is actually a little bit longer than what you'd think you'd be able to explain, but where does Gorgeous start for a brand, and where does that stop before turning that over to text line, for example?
Um, yes, good question. So I mean, Gorgeous pulls together all communication channels. So where it would start and stop would really start with I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to explain it. Say a customer reaches out by email. All right, they've got a question by email. That will come into Gorgeous, and we will the brand will then be able to respond via Gorgeous on that channel. But then they'd also have the opportunity to then respond via text line, through Gorgeous as well. Or if, say, they'd received a message separately through the text line platform to their phone, and they responded to that message, then that's where Gorgeous comes in, because that message that they've responded to would come in as a ticket to Gorgeous. So the two are like work hand in hand, but can be very much independent for sort of being proactive and sending out messages.
And for AJ, so on the topic of text line, is text line only tech support? How does that work with together with Gorgeous? I mean, we shared a little bit about that
Yeah.
through the roundtable.
I guess the way I think about it is, Gorgeous is kind of the hub, and texting is kind of one of the spokes and one of the channels that kind of feed into Gorgeous. But as far as text being just support, like I mentioned earlier, I think texting is part of the full customer journey. Everything from questions, right, or signing up for a consultation and whatever it may be, and using text as that channel to communicate pre-sale, to post-sale questions that come up, and then operations and logistics, and I think really marketing, right? I think when you think about the concept of marketing, the whole point of marketing is touch points, right? How do I stay
Yep.
engaged with this individual? I think the classic advertising or classic marketing or coupons or billboards or whatnot. But I think true marketing, as consumers are getting smarter, really is kind of transitioned to more value based services, and value add things that a brand can provide. And so I think the example that I provided earlier, as far as checking in with a customer post purchase, hey, do you need help with setting that up? 6 months later, hey, the 6 month or 3 month return policy is almost up, just want to make sure everything is good with you. Those are additional touch points, and if you have folks that are loving the brand, that may then be that impetus for them as a reminder, like, yeah, the brand is great, and I actually do need more product, service, whatever it may be, kind of down the road. So, Textline is just a texting platform, but I think we do more than just support and really kind of own that customer journey and relationship end to end. Just like, we joke about this, about how nowadays with friends, sometimes you never talk to your friend on the phone, but you're in a text thread with them for the full year. And then you see them at Christmas time. And you're like, wow, this is what it's like to actually have a human conversation with you, because we've just been on a text thread. And that's kind of the relationship that we allow brands to have.
That's very cool. And so to add on to trying to run off this question here, like I love how AJ kind of put it there, where Gorgeous is like the hub, and Textline is basically enabling you to weave or not weave, orchestrate your text journey or orchestrate the text experience for customers, right? And so where does LTV Plus start and stop? This is where we jump into the hub, we, we jump into the seats, and this is where once the tickets come through to the human agents, that's where we start to provide, like we have human agents who are highly trained on both Gorgeous and Textline that are able to respond to these tickets and have those conversations. If these are pre-sale inquiries, working on converting these pre-sale inquiries ideally into customers, and if they are already buyers, I mean they have already bought your product or they're subscribers, continuing to support them and figuring out how we can extend their lifetime value, be it through upsells, be it maybe sending out even samples, for example, and just really providing that human aspect to it, right? Uh, Before we continue, if you have more questions, since we have about 14 minutes left, feel free to keep sending them in. I did see one or two come through that we will address, towards the later part of this conversation. And stick till the end. We do have offers that we want to share from Gorgeous and Textline as well. So if you guys want to sign up and give it a test run, if you don't have a help desk or a text messaging software yet, this will be a really good opportunity to try that out. So with that in mind, let's round us off with humanizing customer support. Now, one thing that's really interesting is that in this entire roundtable discussion that we've had so far, we've dropped little aspects of how you can humanize customer support. Right? We talked about automation, sparking those conversations that allows human agents to jump in those conversations and engage with customers. We've talked about how having the omni-channel approach creates a better customer experience, because as much as we're talking to a lot of different people, but by being able to have the data in front of you, we're able to as an agent draw references and create a more what was the example that AJ mentioned? You mentioned it was a shop experience, like in the US, like it's a single shop, like not mom and pop shop, was it? Something like that. I forgot.
We call it like Main Street USA, or kind of a small business, that you normally go to. Exactly.
There you go. And so you have that personalization, you have that personalized experience. And, and most customers will not know this, but, you would be able to do this as a brand and scale that together with along the lines of automation. So to kind of round us off, right, Neil, I'll go back to you real quick here. What other aspects of customer support should, a brand bear in mind when they think about technology, and how can they humanize that? Something that we might have missed in this conversation, perhaps.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we have probably peppered the answers to this throughout the rest of the conversation, but there's a couple of things that I would focus in on, which is there's certain complex questions and requirements that will simply always require human touch. I'm thinking about experience that I discussed with someone just today, actually, when they were trying to change a flight, for example. And on one website, they were able to do it. It was completely automated with a chatbot the whole time that went really well. So that was where like automation was good. But then when they moved over to another site to change another flight, they had to speak to a human, and it was really lengthy and didn't work as well. So I thought that was interesting that we always talk about humanization as being like being better, but there's a couple of reasons why sometimes it isn't. So when the customer when it takes longer for the customer, or they find it harder to communicate with that human. But also from a brand perspective, is that live chat takes time and is therefore one of the most expensive ways of communicating with a customer. what was the final question again? Because there was one
So
at the
it's
point
just
that I
basically like
missed.
how what other ways that we can consider humanizing customer support, and I think you've you pretty much shared that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was simply, yeah, I guess like the way that I want to sum it up maybe was, if it's complex, it needs a human, like as simple as that. But also we want to keep like people in charge. We do we like we the more we sort of automate to the
Yeah.
point of someone either not being able to make the decision, like a customer not being able to make the decision on whether or not they're going down the automation route or the human route, the worse the experience is going to be.
All right. And then over to you, AJ. What about you? What other last insights or seeds of knowledge would you like to share with everyone?
I'm gonna go counter to Neil here, where I actually think texting can be a really powerful place for complex issues. And an example that we see quite a bit is around MMS, or texting photos or videos to folks. On the D2C side, if there's a physical product or there's an issue, instead of trying to explain what it is and what's not working, what we found is folks being able to take photos and send that to customer support teams or companies, because as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and getting to resolutions faster that way. It doesn't always, that's, I think there are other times where complex issues require conversation via voice and less back and forth. But I think that's one really strong example that we see that customers really love, because right now we're so accustomed to that behavior, right? You see a photo, you take it, you send it, and we kind of speak in photos with things like Instagram and other photo sharing apps. And so I think customers are just used to that. And I think the last thing, in regards of humanizing the customer experience, I think what something like texting does, and I think this may kind of speak volumes a bit to, or be more relatable to UGQ, is when you're trying to train a team to have a certain brand voice or brand personality, it's much, much harder to do via phone than it is to do via text. And so what we see is kind of in scaling that personalization, allowing your agents to have a personality that that is very on brand, and you're able to communicate in a certain way that's fun or friendly or more professional, sending emojis, sending gifs, kind of adding that as part of kind of the communication channel, and being able to give agents who may be, in different countries and different cultures, a simple way and kind of a universal way to communicate with customers around the world as well.
That's definitely true, and I think like yeah, the emojis piece is something we've been throwing in there. You'd be surprised that not most brands will be very happy to kind of throw that in there, because you can even have that in live chat or emails, right? I mean, text messaging, yeah, for sure, but some brands are not really open to it. But again, like you said, it depends a lot on the brand voice, and it does really help. Yeah, I like what you shared. We definitely do see that. Like that text is definitely a much easier way to train agents at scale to adopt a certain brand voice, because you can have guidelines, the way you text it, the way you reply, even having accidental typos, if you will, right? If it's like a very casual conversation, very fun brand, it does happen from time to time that they want this to happen, and not just like have perfect English up front. You
Well,
know what I mean?
and I think from a training perspective, well, two things with emojis. We're used to texting with emojis. Sending emojis in email is still kind of a weird concept, I think, and people kind of transition that to from texting. But within text, I think it's pretty common.
Yeah,
Be
yeah,
something as simple as like a thumbs up, right? But from a training perspective, one thing that's really interesting is with voice, right? I know Gorgeous has a lot of partners that are transcribing voice conversations, and allowing team managers to be able to track them like they would email. The beauty of text is that it's already transcribed. It's so easy to use as training material, training guides, examples
yes.
for how conversations should look and feel, and directions to go and reference. And because you're not real time, where you'd be like, hold on, let me listen to this other call to see how I should respond to you, and then come back. You can actually, we've seen customers use those text conversations as guidelines and scripts for folks to reference in certain situations.
Yeah, and I think that with the training materials, like we one thing that we like to do with our QA team is that we like to evaluate conversations that worked really well, like and then we use that as training material to as we like to say double down on, right? Like how do we replicate the same success with other customers, and so other agents can learn from that, and then of course where agents need a little bit of a nudge or coaching is where we can kind of pull that back and use that as references, right? So there's one thing that I want to dive into, and I'm going to quickly go over to the Q&A section since we have about 5 minutes left. There was a question that did come through for text line, and I wanted to bring this up here. So let me just find that. I think this is from Katrina Jaramillo, if I said that correctly. So the question here says, I'm very interested in what text line can do for my growing business scheduling customer appointments after work has been completed, so in their home. So I guess I guess she's interested in how TextLine can what TextLine can do for a growing business scheduling customer appointments. So what do
Yeah.
you think about that?
This is one of our most common use cases in that kind of logistics and coordination of what needs to happen. I think I don't know if this is the case, in Europe and in Asia, but at least in the States, texting has been, I think, one of the most common use cases has come from scheduling, specifically like doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, where you're just sending a text to confirm appointment. But one of the challenges with those uh, that initial form of text scheduling is if someone says I can't make it or there is no response, what do you do? A lot of times they had to transition to voice, and so now with texting, or with text line, we enable customers to be able to send that initial text to schedule, to remind, and then to be able to reschedule if need be, because there are a lot of initial appointments that things come up in the last minute, or especially with homes. We deal with a lot of home services. There needing to be additional context of I'm at your gate right now, or is there any, and I need a gate code, or where should I park when I get here? And so I think making sure that the job gets completed, there are no shows, I think are a big part of helping businesses that have scheduling actually fulfill the job.
Thank you so much, AJ and Katrina. If you have like quite a further lead up question to that, just feel free to drop it in, and then while we still have about a few more minutes here. So she actually texted a response here, so I'll just like bring that up on screen. So she says that scheduling is big in her business. No response to voice equals certified letter. A big headache, but I find people will respond to text. So that's amazing. There you go.
If you want to work a text line, Katrina, we can get you a job by the end of the week. Just pushing texting.
There you go. That's awesome. We do have another question here for Gorgeous, but I'm not sure if I'm able to pull that up in the comments, but I'll just read it out loud. So one of the questions is, are brands still nervous about implementing live chat?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there are some brands who are nervous about it. I think I touched on that earlier, particularly luxury brands. But what I would say is that we get over 100 million tickets every year, so that's a lot of data to analyze, and we also do a lot of market research. And what we're seeing is that email is still the biggest support channel. The second biggest is live chat, and then the third biggest is like sort of social media and SMS. Social media and SMS are the fastest growing. Second
Hmm.
fastest growing is live chat, and actually in the demographic, people aged under 50, live chat is the preferred support channel.
Very cool.
So take from that what you will, but your brands who are a bit nervous about implementing live chat should take those. Yeah, should look at it quite seriously if their demographic is under 50.
And you can always just test it out and see how that works, right? Like you can run a certain
Exactly.
number of traffic and just see how that works out. Just prep your team and go with that. Because we usually, when we talk with brands about live chat, if you've never done it before, just test a small stream of your traffic and see how that turns out. Because otherwise, you probably freak out, and I can understand why, because it's real time. Or you can always defer to SMS, like I said. At least that stress isn't so big on you, which is kind of why I think people prefer that option. But to round off the round table, my favorite thing to say today is we have the different offers. So if you're on the fence and have not do not have a appropriate help desk right now, or you're looking for something new, Gorgeous is offering the second and third month for free for webinar attendees. So just let them know that you're signing up through this webinar or roundtable that you've attended today. And for text line, the first month is free for webinar attendees, excluding messaging costs. So feel free to sign up if you've never tested it out. You can find Agent on LinkedIn, or just go to text line and sign up and check this out. And then for LTV Plus, if you're looking to build your own outsourced team, we're offering 10% off for the first 3 months. So feel free to hit me up, GQ on LinkedIn, if you'd like to find out more. And then, of course, for Gorgeous, feel free to find Neil on Gorgeous as well. And with that, I really wish our roundtable had more time, but thank you guys so much for attending, and really appreciate your time, Neil, AJ. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, GQ.
That's it. Talk
Thank you,
soon.
Neil.
Cheers.